Looking to change out the hub bearing on your Monte Carlo? Stay tuned. In this video you're going to see how I change out the hub bearing on this Monte Carlo. It's real simple. The videos aren't going to be that long because it's pretty much a simple process. The hardest part is getting the CV shaft nut off. Those sometimes are really torqued high, and I'll put the torque specs for that nut down into the description. So always be sure to look at the descriptions on all my videos, because I'll put specs or information or where to buy things and stuff like that down in there. So be sure to look at the description. On this Monte Carlo, basically you've got to break your CV shaft nut loose, your lug nuts loose. I'll show where to jack it up from. You don't want to crush something by just putting the jack in the wrong spot. Jack it up, pull the wheel off. You'll remove your brake caliper, then you're going to remove your caliper bracket, remove the rotor, then go ahead and take off the 3 bolts that hold the hub bearing, and you're going to probably want to turn the wheel to the left and the right, pull those bolts out, and then the hub bearing will come loose. And if you have an anti-lock brake, it's going to have a cable that kind of runs from the bearing through the hole. And in this one, with the clip that come on the aftermarket did not fit the hole real well on the factory little bracket out there. It just didn't match up. I had to actually trim the aftermarket clip to make it pop in there and snap in. That might be the only problem you might run into, but it's pretty straightforward. So watch how I do it in this video.
Okay, the first thing you gotta do is get this big lug nut, or this big nut off of the CV shaft. And it's a 35mm. And I don't have a cheater bar right now. You want to do that when the car is on the ground. Also, while you get the car on the ground, if you don't have an impact gun while it's sitting here, this is the time to loosen up the lug nuts. When you go jack it up, make sure that you're on that mount right there. That's kind of a support to be able to jack it by. If you put it anywhere else, you'll end up crushing the body. Okay, now the next step is to take the caliper off. And it's a 14mm nut, or bolt rather. And one tip is to get this to release off the rotor, pull it towards you, and that compresses the piston in a little bit and lets the caliper free up off the rotor. See how I get leverage? I'm using my knee to push it up. I'm not straining my muscles. You have to disconnect that wire. That is the sensor in the hub that goes to the anti-lock brakes. So you have to get that free and disconnect the wire. You're probably going to want to turn the wheel to the right and the left to be able to get these bolts. Even though these are pretty heavy bolts, and you can see if you look at the hub, you're going to bolt there, you're going to have 3 there, and then probably can't see it from here, but down below there. And it's to the back. And that's one of them. And they're smaller bolt heads, like 13s, so that makes it a little bit easier to get a socket in there. In order to get to this top bolt, you're going to have to knock the CV shaft back. You're going to have to take this nut off anyways in order to get this hub bearing off. So Use a brass hammer, or if you have a steel hammer, use a block of wood. In order to get this upper bolt, you're going to have to go 3/8 drive to be able to slide it in there, and about 6-inch extension.
And ESC.
In preparation to go back together with it, I'm going to put a little blue thread locker onto the threads. That way it doesn't back off. You can use red, but it's going to make it a little tougher to get them off. Because the rule of thumb, these replacement hub bearings, they only usually last 2 to 3 years. So, because parts suck these days. Get the splines to start into the CV shaft. Be sure to start these bolts with your fingers. Don't try to push it in or rush it in with a tool, because you can strip the threads. These hub bolts should torque at least around 100 foot-pounds. While you got this part, it's a good time to inspect your rotor front and back, see if it's got any scores or anything grooved or anything in it. You can take a big pair of channel locks and squish this together. Take your pad out and put it in there, but put your pad facing that so your tool don't mess up the back side, or just a piece of metal. If it takes more effort than what you can twist this little handle to quick compress that piston, you've got problems. And you shouldn't have to compress it all the way, you're just wanting to put your lug nuts on, hold your rotor in place, that way it doesn't knock your pads out of your caliper bracket. Same on your caliper bracket bolts, just put a little bit of blue Loctite on there to keep it from just ever conveniently coming apart while you're driving down the road. And these caliper bolts, they also torque around 100-120 foot-pounds, so you want to get a good grip on it. A good leverage spot, that's why it says it's easier to turn the wheel. Undo our hook, and we'll have to hook up our anti-lock brakes before we finish here.
Next time.
Be sure to plug up your anti-lock brake. So as you see, changing out a hub bearing isn't that bad. It works great if you've got air tools, or like I said, before you start jacking it up and getting it into the air, I'd break all your bolts loose. If you don't have an air impact gun, just use the car's weight against itself and break all the bolts loose for the wheel.
CV nut and the lug nuts, and then just assemble it like you showed in the video. And it should be pretty straightforward. So if you have any questions or any concerns, be sure to leave me a comment. And down in the description you'll find my website, and there you can contact me on my website as well. You can share pictures, whatever you want to. There's no charge, and I'm not looking to collect email addresses. It's just a lot easier to communicate through email than it is on comments on YouTube. But anyhow, so if you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe, and always check back because I'm always working on something crazy. See you in the next one.